Hello, everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Good
So,
afternoon, ma'am.
after good afternoon. So, today the eyeball second part. Okay. The development of eyeball will not be in this part, but the eyeball second part means that I have told you about the layers of the eyeball. Now, the contents of the eyeball. So, what are the contents of the eyeball? That is the lens. You can see the lens, and also in front of the lens there is a chamber, that is the segment, that is the anterior segment, where the two chambers are present, that is the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber, and posteriorly the posterior segment is present, that is the vitreous body. So only these structures. And also we you have not taught about this extraocular muscle, so I will tell about the extraocular muscle and the movements of the eyeball. Already I have sent you the in your email the assignment questions. There are 10 questions. Please submit the answer. Now so these are the structures I will tell today, that is the lens and the chambers of the, not the chambers, that is the vitreous humor and the aqueous humor of the eye. Okay. Now, first the lens. Now you can see the lens that is suspended by the suspensory ligament, which are coming from the ciliary body, and it is situated in front part of the eyeball, and behind the iris. Behind the iris. Now lens, the shape of the lens, it is biconvex, but the anterior convexity is less than that of the posterior convexity, and its midpoint of the anterior surface, that is just behind the pupil, and that part is known as the anterior pole. And posteriorly also there is a convexity, that is the center point of the posterior convexity is known as the posterior pole. And the anterior pole and posterior pole, if you join together, then you will get the axis of the lens. Now the posterior pole, that is the posterior surface of the lens, it is seated on a fossa that is known as the hyaloid fossa. Hyaloid fossa. And that is the maximum distance between the two poles, and that is known as the equator of the lens. Now the lens, it is inside the lens, it is a elastic solid, and it has a nucleus at the center, and at the periphery, that is a slightly softer part, and that is formed by the lens fibers. Now these lens fibers are living cells. Actually, these lens fibers are the living cells, and they are formed from one epithelium, one layer of epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, that is present on the anterior surface of the lens, and they have got a mitotic activity, particularly near the equator. Near the equator there is a mitotic activity of this epithelium, and by this mitotic activity they will form the lens fibers or the lens fiber cells, because there are nuclei are present. The superficial lens fibers, they have the nuclear fibers, nuclei, but the deeper fibers, they don't have the nuclei, and they are more dense near the center, near the nucleus. Okay, and they are made up of some protein. Now, this protein is not turned over when they are damaged. So there is deposition of this protein is present, and that will cause the sclerosis of the lens. And then when the lens is sclerosed, then that condition is known as the cataract. Usually it happens after the age of 40. It starts to form at the age of 40, that is the cataract. Okay, so that is about the lens. Now in the lens you can see that from the anterior pole to the nucleus there is a suture, and also from the posterior pole to the nucleus there is a suture, or towards the equator there is a suture. So these are the lens suture, and the lens fiber, they are attached circumferentially from the equator towards the suture. Okay. So these are the deeper fibers, these are the superficial fibers. So that is about the lens. Now come to the aqueous humor. So now you know that aqueous humor, it is formed from where? From the ciliary body, ciliary epithelium, isn't it? So the ciliary epithelium are present on the posterior aspect of the ciliary body, and from there it enters into the posterior chamber first. Then it will pass to the anterior chamber through the pupil, and after that that will form constantly. The aqueous humor is formed constantly, so it has to be drained. So where does it drain? It drains into the canal of Schlemm, that I have already told you. And from the canal of Schlemm, where does it drain? It will drain into the veins of the eyeball. Okay, so that is the aqueous humor. Now another humor is present, that is behind the lens, that is the vitreous humor. It is slightly gel-like. Though it is gel-like, it's 99% of the vitreous body is formed only by water, and only 1% that is formed by protein, that is the glycosaminoglycan, and also there is collagen, and also there will be the sugar and salt. But the 99% of vitreous body is water. Only on the that aspect, that is on the peripheral aspect, that is condensed, and it will form the vitreous membrane. It will form the vitreous membrane, and in front, just behind the lens, it will form a fossa where the brain lens is lodged, and that is known as the hyaloid fossa. Now here the lens, it is avascular. So from where it will get its nutrition? It will get its nutrition from the aqueous humor, and lens is bathed in the aqueous humor. So from aqueous humor mainly it will get its nutrition. Now the lens is avascular, but in fetal life there is a tunnel, and through that tunnel the hyaloid artery passes, and that hyaloid artery supplies the lens. But 6 weeks before delivery, this artery disappears and the canal remains, and that canal is known as the hyaloid canal. Though this hyaloid canal is present, this part is not opaque, it is transparent. Even the vitreous membrane, here is the vitreous membrane where the vitreous is condensed, there also it is transparent. So the cornea, anterior chamber, lens and the vitreous body all are transparent, and they form the refractive media. And refractive media means when the light passes through it, it will be refracted, and then it will form an image over the retina. So that is the vitreous humor. Now what are the arterial supply of the eyeball? The arterial supply, it comes from the ophthalmic artery. Ophthalmic artery is a branch of internal carotid artery. That is the first branch of the internal carotid artery is the ophthalmic artery. The ophthalmic artery enters into the orbit through the superior orbital fissure, and it gives various ciliary branches. These ciliary branches are the posterior short ciliary branch, the posterior long ciliary branch, and also the anterior ciliary branch. The posterior short ciliary branch, they are about 6 to 7 in number, and they divide. So when they divide, they will form 12 to 15 or 12 to 14 ciliary arteries, and these 12 to 15 ciliary arteries, short ciliary arteries, they pierce the sclera surrounding the optic nerve or surrounding the optic nerve, and they enter into the choroid. When they enter into the choroid, they will divide and form a network and supply the various parts of the eyeball. Okay, particularly, and also the outer part of the retina, the sclera, choroid, and the outer part of the retina are supplied by the short ciliary artery. And this short ciliary artery, they form a circle surrounding the optic disc, and that circle is known as the arterial circle of Zinn. So you have got one zine, that is the zonular ligament, that will form the zonule of zine. So here also there is an arterial circle of zine. So there is one person that he was the German anatomist and botanist. His name is Zinn, and he has found some, he has written a book on anatomy also, about the eye anatomy, and some structures are named after him, like this zonule of Zinn, and here this is the arterial circle of Zinn. Now from there, from this arterial circle, the various branches, they will form a network in the choroid. Now come to the long ciliary artery. Now the posterior long ciliary arteries, these are the long ciliary arteries, they are lateral and medial. So they are present on the lateral aspect as well as on the medial aspect. Now this long ciliary artery, they pass first between the sclera and the choroid. There is a space between the sclera and the choroid, that is the lamina fusca, and through that space they will pass towards the anterior aspect of the eyeball. So here you can see that the long ciliary artery, they are lateral, that this is the one long ciliary artery. Suppose this is the lateral long ciliary artery, it will pass between the sclera and the choroid, and near the ciliary body it will go towards the outer border of the iris, where it will anastomose with the short ciliary artery, and here they will form another arterial circle at the periphery of the iris, that is known as the greater arterial circle. Whereas the anterior ciliary artery, here you can see the anterior ciliary artery. This anterior ciliary artery, they supply the extraocular muscles, and then along with the tendon, they pierce the sclera near the insertion of the extraocular tendons, and then they enter into the eyeball and they anastomose. Here these anterior ciliary arteries are coming, and they anastomose with the short ciliary and the long ciliary artery, and also form the greater arterial circle. Ultimately, the arteries from this greater arterial circle, they will form another anastomosis surrounding the margin of the pupil, and that is known as the lesser arterial circle. So there are three arterial circles. One is the surrounding the optic disc, that is the circle of Zinn. Another at the posterior, at the periphery of the iris, that is the greater arterial circle, and another is the margin of the pupil, that is the lesser arterial circle. Now what about the vein? You can see the veins are there, and these veins are superficial structures, and these veins, these are the choroidal veins, they converge and they form the single vein, and this they converge like a hole, so they are known as the vortices. So from these vortices, the vortex veins, they will come out. How many vortex veins are there? Here, another thing I have forgotten to tell you, that is about the central artery of the retina. The central artery of the retina also supplies the eyeball, particularly the inner aspect of the retina are supplied by the central artery of the retina, but it is also a branch of the ophthalmic artery, and this central artery, it first runs in the dural sheath of the optic nerve. So optic nerve, it is surrounded by the meninges, the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Okay, and it runs in the dural sheath of the eyeball, and then about 8 millimeter away from the posterior pole of the eyeball, it pierces the the optic nerve, and runs in its center along with the central vein of retina, and then this artery, it pierces the optic disc, and it comes to the inner layer of the retina, that is the inner layer of the retina, and where it ramifies, and then it supplies the inner layers of the eyeball, but not the layers of the rods and cone. The rods and cone, they are present in the outer layer, so they will supply inner layers only. Okay, so that is the layers of the retina. As they are passing through the subarachnoid space, that is just deep to the dura. So if there is any intraocular pressure is increased, that will pass into the subarachnoid space surrounding the dura, and that may compress the central artery of retina. And as it is supplied the inner layers of the retina, so that retinal layers will be damaged, and that may cause the blindness. Okay, so that is the central artery of retina. And the venous drainage, now come to that this is the vortex vein, and in the ciliary body these veins are known as the ciliary veins, and from the anterior aspect that of the eye, that is from the iris, these veins they go posteriorly. Ultimately all of them they will join the choroid vein, which are present in the choroid layer. Most superficial vascular layer is the venous layer in the choroid, and then they converge to form the vortex and form the vortex vein. There are about 4 or 5, usually 4 to 8 vortex veins are present. If you divide the eyeball into 4 quadrant, then for each quadrant there will be at least one vortex vein will be present. So 4 to 8 vortex veins are present, and this vortex vein, when they pierce the sclera, they will drain either into the superior ophthalmic vein or into the inferior ophthalmic vein, which comes out through the superior orbital fissure and inferior orbital fissure, and ultimately they will drain into the ophthalmic vein. Okay, so that is the veins. Now this ophthalmic vein, ultimately that will drain both the superior and inferior ophthalmic vein. They join with each other, and ultimately the ophthalmic vein drain into the cavernous sinus. The central vein of retina also drain into the cavernous sinus. Now the cavernous sinus, when they drain into the cavernous sinus, this is the superior ophthalmic vein, this is the inferior ophthalmic vein, and they drain into the cavernous sinus. Now from this cavernous sinus, it is connected to the extra cranial veins by the emissary vein. Okay, emissary vein, and these emissary veins have no valves. So if there is any infection, and through these emissary veins they will go to the pterygoid venous plexus here, and this pterygoid venous plexus is also connected to the facial vein by the deep facial vein. They are all valveless. So what happens if there is any infection in the face or in this region, they will enter into the pterygoid plexus, and then this infection will go to the cavernous sinus, and from cavernous sinus they can go to the ophthalmic vein. So that is one applied importance for these veins. So because they drain into the ophthalmic vein, all the veins, central retinal vein also drain into the cavernous sinus. Okay. So that is important. Now what about the lymphatic drainage? So it has been thought that there is no lymphatic drainage for the eyeball, but now in recent advances, recent studies, they have found that the lymphatic drainage is there. There are lymphatic vessels present in the eyelids, in the lacrimal glands, in the conjunctiva, in the extraocular muscles, and they go ultimately to the deep cervical group of lymph node, that is the occipital node, pre and post auricular nodes. But the cornea, lens, iris, ciliary body, and they have no lymphatic channels. They have no lymphatic channels. Till date there is no lymphatic channels from these structures have been found. But it has been thought that some lymphatic structure must be present in the choroid. So that is the recent advances. We don't know about that very clearly. Then in case of diabetes, you know that the blood sugar level is increased, and when this blood sugar level is increased, that sugar which is present in the blood, that cause damage to the arterial wall. Now in the arteries of the eyeball, in the retina particularly, they are very thin. The retinal arteries are very thin, and when this sugar in the blood, that will cause damage to this artery, they will cause, there will be rupture of this blood vessel, and when they ruptured, there will be bleeding, hemorrhage, and that blood will come into the vitreous. So there will be, if you, in case of diabetic retinopathy, if we see the retina through an ophthalmoscope, you can get the aneurysm, that is dilatation of the retinal artery, and also there will be hemorrhagic spots are there, and due to that is compensate, there will be the other blood vessels, they will grow, but these blood vessels are very thin and they cannot work properly, but there will be, you can get the abnormal growth of blood vessels are there. Some exudates are also present, okay, hard exudate and soft exudates are present. Also there are some woolly spots will be present, these are known as cotton wool spots. These are the soft exudate, and the hard exudates are also present. The soft exudate are woolly spot, so they are known as the cotton wool spot. So these are the changes in the diabetic retinopathy. Now we will come to the muscles of the eyeball. Already I have told you about the intrinsic muscles. They are the smooth muscle, that is the ciliaris muscle, the sphincter pupillae muscle, and the dilated pupillae muscle. Okay, isn't it? Now this muscle, they are smooth muscles, and they help in to accommodate our eye. So they supply the muscles of the iris, that is the sphincter pupillae and the dilated pupillae, and also they supply the muscles of the ciliary body, that is the ciliaris muscle, and they are supplied by, as they are smooth muscle, they will be supplied by the autonomic nerves, that is by the parasympathetic and sympathetic. I have already told you in the last class. Okay, now the extrinsic muscles. The extrinsic muscles are the skeletal muscles, so they are supplied by the cranial nerves, and that is mostly the oculomotor nerves, and also there is one nerve is there that is supply one muscle, that is the lateral rectus. Another muscle is also supplied by the fourth cranial nerve, that is the superior oblique. So nerve supply, if you do remember, so most of the muscles, they are, all the muscles are supplied by the oculomotor nerve, that is the third cranial nerve, and the lateral rectus is supplied by the sixth cranial nerve, and the superior oblique is supplied by the fourth cranial nerve. So LR6, SO4, and other than that, the other muscles are supplied by the oculomotor nerve. So there are two types of muscle, extraocular muscle. Four muscles, they are known as the recti muscle, that is the superior rectus, the inferior rectus, the medial rectus, and the on other side is the lateral rectus. And also there are two other muscles are present. They are known as the oblique muscle, the superior oblique and the inferior oblique. So there are 6 extraocular muscles are present. Now all these recti muscle, they will take origin from a common tendinous ring. Common tendinous ring, this is the superior orbital fissure, and there is one common tendinous ring is attached, and superiorly and medially and inferiorly it is attached to the dura mater surrounding the optic nerve, and below it is attached to the sphenoid, that is the body of the sphenoid. So that is the annulus tendinous ring, and from this annulus tendinous ring, the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus and the lateral rectus muscle, they will take origin. Okay, and the oblique muscles, they are taking origin from the bones. The oblique muscles, the superior oblique muscle, that will be attached close to the common tendon but outside the tendinous ring from the body of the sphenoid bone, and whereas the inferior oblique, that will be attached to the floor of the anterior margin of the floor of the orbit. So I am coming to that. one by one. So these are the extraocular muscles. These are the recti muscles. The recti muscles are the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, and lateral rectus. They are all taking origin from the common tendinous ring, and this is the superior rectus. Above that, there will be the levator palpebrae superioris. It is attached to the eyeball, so it is not considered as the muscles of the eyeball, but sometimes it may be considered. In some books it is considered as the muscles of the eyeball, and this is the levator palpebrae superioris muscle, and it is attached actually to the eyelid, but it acts with the superior rectus muscle. When it elevates the eyeball, the superior rectus muscle elevates the eyeball, and then the upper eyelid is also elevated. So that's why the levator palpebrae superioris muscle can be considered, but usually it is not considered. Now this is the superior rectus muscle. So it is attached to the common tendinous ring, superior aspect, and all these rectus, all the muscles, extraocular muscles, they are attached to the sclera. Their tendon pierces the tendon's capsule, and they are attached to the sclera about 4 to 8 millimeter away from the limbus of the eyeball, that is the sclerocorneal junction. So they are all attached away from the limbus about 4 to 8 millimeter away. The medial rectus, it is more close to the limbus, that is 5 millimeter away. Inferior rectus 6 millimeter, lateral rectus 7 to 7.7 or 7 to 8. Superior rectus like that. Okay, so these are the their attachment, and their movement I will come to that later on, and the nerve supply already I have told you. Now come to the superior oblique muscles. I have told that the superior oblique muscle is attached on the lateral side of the common tendinous ring from the body of the sphenoid, and then it goes along the medial wall of the orbit, and on the medial wall of the orbit anteriorly there is a fibrotendinous ring, and it passes through that ring, the fibrotendinous ring known as the trochlea. So it passes through that ring, and then it comes to the superolateral surface of the eyeball, deep to the superior rectus muscle. So this is the attachment, and it is attached behind the equator. They are attached, the recti muscle are attached in front of the equator, but the oblique muscles are attached behind the equator. So this is the superior oblique muscle. Here is the attachment of the inferior oblique muscle. Now come to that inferior oblique muscle. So from where it is taking origin? From the floor of the orbit. It takes origin from the floor of the orbit near its anterior margin. From the bone is the maxilla. On the anterior surface, the floor of the orbit is formed by the maxilla. So it takes attachment on the axilla in front, and then it runs down, and then it comes to the inferolateral aspect of the behind the equator, and it is attached to the sclera here. Okay, so these are the origin and insertion of this recti and the oblique muscle. Nerve supply also I have told you. Now what are the positions when we look? That is known as the gaze. So what are the positions of our look? So that is a primary position when we look straight. When we look straight, that is the primary position. When we look either to the right or to the left or to the up or to the down, that is known as the secondary position. But when we look upwards and to the left, or upwards and to the right, or downwards and to the left and downwards and to the right, then it is known as the tertiary position. So these are the different positions of gaze. Okay, now the ocular muscle, I have brought one, this one. What is this? What is this? Tell me.
Paperweight.
paperweight. Okay, now I have brought this paperweight as an eyeball. Okay, so this paperweight, it can rotate. It is rounded, so it can rotate. Like eyeball, it will also rotate. So this eyeball rotates in around three axes. One is the anteroposterior axis, one is the transverse axis, another is the vertical axis. So when it moves along the anteroposterior axis, it will either elevate or depress. Okay, so that elevation of the eyeball or depression of the eyeball. So that is the along the anteroposterior axis. So in the anteroposterior axis, sorry, this is the anteroposterior axis. So there will be lateral rotation or there will be medial rotation. So if this is the anteroposterior axis, then there will be lateral rotation or medial rotation. So when we look laterally, there is lateral rotation. When we look laterally means to the lateral rotation, and when we look at the center, that is the medial rotation. Okay, so lateral rotation and medial rotation. The lateral rotation, it is caused by the lateral rectus, and the medial rotation, it is caused by the medial rectus. So when we look to the right side, the lateral rectus of the right eye will contract, but the medial rectus of the left eye will contract. And and when we just opposite, when we look to the left side. Okay, so that is along the anteroposterior axis, that is the lateral rotation and medial rotation. And along the transverse axis, there will be superior rotation and inferior rotation. So there will be elevation of the eye when we look upward. So that is the just straight upwards, then that is the elevation. And when we look down, that is depression, that is around the transverse axis, that is transverse axis of the eyeball. Okay, and all these axes, they meet at the center. So there is another axis is present, that is the vertical axis. So in that vertical axis, it will rotate on medial side or lateral side. So that is known as extorsion of the eyeball, extorsion of the eyeball, and that is caused by the oblique muscles, the superior oblique and the inferior oblique muscle. So in vertical axis, there will be lateral rotation, and that is the movement here, what is written by abduction and adduction in the vertical axis. So these are the axes, and there are the, now you can see this is the superior rectus muscle, this is the inferior rectus muscle, this is lateral rectus, this is medial rectus, here is the superior oblique, and here is the inferior oblique. Now our axis, that is the visual axis or the optic axis, they are not parallel, they are slightly converging, isn't it? So when the superior rectus move, it not only cause the elevation of the eyeball, but it also causes the that is the this one is the nasal side, so adduction of the eyeball, and also there will be internal rotation of the eyeball. So adduction of the eyeball and internal rotation of the eyeball. So superior rectus action is elevation, adduction and internal rotation. Similarly, the inferior rectus, it will move down, so that it will move the eyeball downwards. So that is, there will be depression, and also there will be adduction, but there will be external rotation. So for when we look straight upwards, where this superior rectus cannot do that alone. So it will take the help of the inferior oblique muscles. So inferior oblique muscle, it also elevates the inferior, that is the eyeball. There is superior rotation. So it will cause the elevation of the eyeball, and along with that, just opposite of the superior rectus, that is, it will cause extorsion and adduction. So extorsion and intorsion, they will be cut. The adduction and abduction, that will also be nullified. So only the elevation will be there. So for straight look upwards, when we look upwards straight, then only the superior rectus and the inferior oblique muscle will act. Similarly, when we look down straight, the inferior rectus along with the superior oblique muscle, they will act together, and medial rectus will cause the medial rotation or adduction, and lateral rectus will cause the lateral rotation or abduction. Okay, so these are the various movement. Now here you can also just remember this figure, and you can write the actions of the different muscle. That is, inferior oblique will cause elevation, superior rectus will also cause elevation, but it is abduction, the superior rectus adduction, inferior oblique extorsion, but in superior rectus intorsion. So the superior rectus and inferior oblique are responsible for the upward gaze, straight upward gaze. Similarly, the superior oblique and the inferior rectus, they will responsible for the straight downward gaze. Lateral rectus for the straight lateral gaze, and medial lateral direction, and medial rectus for the straight medial gaze. The lateral rectus, the two eyes, when they work together, that is known as the conjugate movement of the eyeball. Okay, I will come to that. Now the superior rectus, when we look upward as well as medially, then the superior rectus. Inferior rectus when we look medially and downward. Lateral rectus and medial rectus, so it is easy. And inferior oblique, that is when we look upwards and laterally. And superior oblique when we look downwards and laterally. So that is, these are the movements of the extraocular muscle. So conjugate movement means when we look, then our both the eyes, they work in unison, means they work in the same direction. Okay, so that is known as the conjugate movement. This is the primary position when we look straight, that is the primary position. When we look straight upwards or straight downwards or straight laterally or straight medially, that is the secondary position. And tertiary position when we look upwards and laterally, or downwards and laterally, or upwards and medially and downwards on medially. So these are the tertiary position. And when the two eyes, they do not move together, that is known as the squint or strabismus. So there is a big chapter on squint or strabismus. So when you will go to the higher classes, then you will know about that, the eye classes. There you will know about the squint or strabismus. Strabismus, it should be one A should be here. Okay, now there are various type of strabismus. The one eye, this strabismus may be due to the paralysis of the eye, or due to, if the visual axis is not in the center, then also there will be strabismus. So there are various types, so that you will know later: estropia, extropia, hypertropia, hypotropia. So this is the normal eye, but this is the squint eye. So in case of estropia, the eye is focused, that eye can move upwards, downwards, laterally, medially, but this eye cannot move. This focus is fixed. So it is medially fixed, so that is estropia. When it is laterally fixed, it is extropia. When it's above fixed, that is the visual axis is passing above the normal visual axis, that is the hypertropia. And this is the visual axis is below. So these are the thing. So that is, if you have any questions about this, you please ask. Is it clear to you about the eyeball?
Yes, ma'am.
It is clear?
No.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.